Hi, everybody. I guess before I start, I'd like to thank the Orange County Historical Museum for inviting me. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I certainly enjoyed this opportunity to do a little nostalgic reminiscing of my own. And I just met Nancy tonight, but we're going to have to speak afterward about the coincidence that a Pontiac station wagon figures in the story. So who knows? I guess it was a popular car. All right, here goes. It starts in the middle of the night. It's not really the middle of the night, it's 5:30 in the morning. But when I'm 8 years old and have no working relationship with 5:30 in the morning, all I know is that my father has poked his head into my bedroom, told me to get up, and vanished. And now the cold world is pitch black outside the window. The lights and air are strange in my head. And I am stumbling into my clothes and downstairs into the Pontiac station wagon, where I promptly fall back asleep before the car is out of the driveway. That's in my hometown of York, Pennsylvania. And by the time I wake up again, we're in New Jersey, or even New York, and I have to pee. And my little sister has to pee. And we're just sitting there in the back of the station wagon all clenched up because Dad won't stop until Mom says she has to pee. Finally he stops and we hop to the bathrooms and then have lunch at McDonald's. Back into the station wagon, and now I'm awake, which means car sickness is lurking. No amount of Dramamine ever changes that. If I'm in a car, and especially if I'm behind the front seat, soon enough my stomach turns into a washing machine. Best thing to do is to try to fall back asleep, and most of the time I can. It's a roughly 9-hour trip from southern Pennsylvania to Concord, New Hampshire. And if I spend 7 of those hours zonked out, it's a major personal victory. Because this trip is not a one-time experience. This is a great tradition that begins when I am 5 years old and continues until I am 18. And it is well worth the dark starts and the hours of discomfort, because even as a child, I understand it as the greatest expression of my family's love for our friends, the Jenkins. Before there is York, Pennsylvania, and Concord, New Hampshire, there is Columbus, Ohio. In Columbus, my parents lived next door to Susie and Mike Jenkins. The Jenkins have a daughter, Jennifer, who is a year older than I am. Then the Jenkins have a son, Michael, who is 2 years younger than I am. Then the Jenkins moved to New Hampshire. And a few months after that, my sister Amanda joins the family, and we moved to Pennsylvania. Suddenly, my parents' best friends are 450 miles away instead of 20 feet. It shouldn't be a surprise that my parents and the Jenkins want to stay in touch, but they feel too strongly about that to leave things to chance. So they decide we will share the Easter and Thanksgiving holidays. For the next 13 years, unless something very unusual happens, one family makes the drive into or out of New England to visit the other for Easter, and the visit is returned on Thanksgiving. In that whole time, I think we only miss 1 or 2 holidays. I could tell you about the Easters we share with the Jenkins, highlighted by Sunday morning basket hunts with an elaborate series of rhyming clues that lead to a bogus set of baskets filled with mud eggs from the Easter pig, before we finally get to the good stuff. I could tell you about the Thanksgivings we host for the Jenkins at our house in Pennsylvania, which are brilliant and delightful. But what I really want to tell you about is the Thanksgivings the Jenkins host for us in New Hampshire, perhaps 7 or 8 times over this 13-year span. These days, if I wind up in the type of conversation in which it feels appropriate to share that Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday, the reason I usually give is that Thanksgiving includes all the things I like about Christmas: time off, family, the simple joys of cooking, baking, and eating. But it leaves out many of the things I don't particularly care for about Christmas. A stressful month crammed with competing social engagements, trying to figure out what to give everyone, pretending to like the occasional gift that stupefies me. But the true reason I love Thanksgiving, and the reason it has been such a bittersweet holiday for me ever since, is the Jenkins and Concord. And because there is no way to go back to those lovely times with those lovely people in that lovely place. Where are we then, anyway? Somewhere in New York, passing through Connecticut, and finally Massachusetts, arriving in New Hampshire in the late afternoon, and I'm sprawled in the back of a cream-colored Pontiac station wagon doing my best to stifle my nausea. This will become more difficult as the years go by. At some point, probably about the time I hit double digits, I grow too tall to stretch out in the back of the station wagon. But by then, I have a Walkman and a clutch of tapes by the Eurythmics and Howard Jones to help while away the discomfort. At long last, Dad pulls up on Essex Street in Concord, and I unfold, standing tentatively on the icy sidewalk and inhaling the frigid air to settle my stomach. Perched on a shallow lawn, the Jenkins home is a solid peaked roof house, taller than it is wide, with a wood-railed front porch, a mysterious brick cellar, and a finished attic under the eaves that is son Michael's bedroom where I will bunk with him. A moment later, we are enveloped by this house and by the Jenkins. In late November, with the almost inevitable New England snowscape outside, the Jenkins house feels like a warm, living thing, identifiable by its sense of pine sol and imported coffee, blueberry muffins and cranberry tea, and soon enough, turkey and pie. Holidays are frequently anchored by potent sensory experiences, and not just aromas. I can hear the Jenkins house, too. The lively tread of feet on wooden stairs that only creak slightly. The delicious sound of Susie Jenkins' voice, one part reed, one part glass, as she tells stories, laughs, and calls through the house to Jennifer and Michael. And that perfect public radio station we all hope to find someday, but which actually exists in Concord, New Hampshire, or at least it does in the late 70s and the 80s. You know the one. It constantly plays elegant chamber music that twitters and bubbles along like a gentle brook, Brahms and Haydn, Schubert and Boccherini, and the music is only broken now and then by a man or woman who apparently has been pruning a bonsai tree or raking pebbles in a Zen garden while the music played, waiting patiently to tell us the details of the musicians on the recording in a soothing bedtime story voice and make unironic public service announcements about the Liberation Ideology film series at the local arts council. The Jenkins house has this magical radio station playing at all hours of the day and into the night through an aged receiver on the buffet in the dining room. As a score, it is instantly animating and soothing, new and familiar, and I have made playlist after playlist in attempts to capture that understated blend of hominess and sophistication. We arrive usually on Wednesday and are immediately absorbed into this house of life, where something quietly unusual is always happening, at least by the standards of this wide-eyed boy. My first serious games of Scrabble are played in the Jenkins house. I have my first experience of Saturday Night Live here in its subversive late 70s heyday, when somehow it is comedy gold for straight-laced comedians Bob and Ray to tunelessly sing Do You Think I'm Sexy while perched on a sofa in three-piece suits. There is a visit when the Jenkins ask, have you heard of Prairie Home Companion? Probably a decade before that show explodes in syndication all over the country. At one point, Susie is freelancing for some nonprofit organization, and I'm fascinated by her project of laying out their newsletter by hand on a composition board so it can be mimeographed. But really, these holiday visits are not heavily scheduled. We spend a great deal of time sitting around together or splitting off in all manner of permutations to enjoy each other's company. And the Jenkins are among the most brilliant people I'll ever meet. Once she becomes a teenager, Jennifer is the first teenage intellectual I know. Her hair begins to streak with gray, Susan Sontag-like, while she is in high school, and she's always pondering poems by Neruda in the original Spanish, or laboring over classical flute pieces. Jennifer has an easy mirth that opens her face from the spark in her eyes to her throaty laugh. But she has a world weariness, too, a tangible sophistication that makes it as easy to imagine her in a Paris commune or at the Algonquin table. Son Michael is always listening to cooler music than I am, things like Herbie Hancock and Frankie Goes to Hollywood and the Tom Tom Club. He is friends with names like Eaton Tarbell, who I never managed to meet, but who lives like Odysseus in the epic stories Michael tells about him. Michael is the least bohemian of the Jenkins clan, keeping Paul Mitchell hair gel in the bathroom and sharing my hopeless interest in breakdancing. Mike Sr. is the one I feel I know the least. During the time of these Thanksgivings, he is the director of handicapped services for the state of New Hampshire, and he frequently works over parts of the holiday weekends. He is a master of the New York Times crossword puzzle and fiendishly good at Scrabble, which he claims is because he has a minor case of dyslexia. I have a sense of Mike as a person who is equally loving of and mystified by children, his own and others, a combination that makes him endearing and remote at the same time. If I remember correctly, Susie and Mike met in the Peace Corps. I believe that for Mike, his work, both developing community resources in El Salvador and advocating for public services in New Hampshire, is a deeply felt vocation that has the tone of a beatitude or a corporal work of mercy. I don't think Mike knows how not to do these things. There's also their dog, Jessica, a grizzled terrier who holds a position in the Jenkins home akin to that of a prickly lesbian aunt, who rides to the park in a wagon after she becomes too arthritic to walk all the way there and back. All of this is to say that the Jenkins have an honorary place on my family's tree, despite not being relatives in the proper sense. My sister and I only see Jennifer and Michael twice a year, but we have a tangible cousin-like connection established before we were old enough to articulate it, which allows us to pick back up as though we never parted, the moment someone gets out of a car at the end of a long day of driving. For me, the Jenkins are the smart, cultured, interested, and interesting family who legitimize my own smart, cultured, interested family. My father is a PhD metallurgist. My sister will go on to double major in statistics and production, and these days she has conference calls with people at Lenovo to tell them all the ways they're doing it wrong. My mother is a bottomless well of arts and culture. Growing up in a family of intelligent, neurotic people, and sometimes wondering whether we've been quarantined together because of those qualities, it is quietly reassuring to hang out with the Jenkins in a quarantine of 8 in their lovely home. And what do? We talk and laugh and cook and bake and eat and sleep and make occasional excursions out into the New Hampshire winter, perhaps to hear one of the neighbors play the guitar in her living room and sing Cat Stevens songs. He is still Cat Stevens at that time. Or accompany Jessica to the park, where son Michael commands her to frolic, and she gambles around the snowy grass while we spin on the merry-go-rounds. The Thanksgiving meal is the centerpiece, the ritual, the sacrament even, that makes all this possible. But that hour at the holiday table is one of the least distinct in my memory, to tell the truth. If anything, I have a profound sense of sharing a great number of details with you, yet failing to convey their greater whole, which is the experience of easy, organic love between two families. Love my family shares with the Jenkins in all sorts of ways, but which is epitomized for me by Thanksgiving at their house. So what happens? I've told you these visits continue until I am 18, and maybe only a few of you who haven't been paying close attention will be shocked to learn I'm a few years beyond that. But the visits eventually come to an end, and for no reason other than the passing of time. First Jennifer, then I, then Michael, and finally Amanda goes off to college, complicating the logistics of holiday weekends. First Michael, then Amanda, then Jennifer gets married. I haven't yet, though things have been looking up for me. That's another story. Michael and Amanda have children, not together. These days, Jennifer is a true New York City bohemian who creates astonishing renderings of plants and flowers in colored pencils and paints whimsical illustrations for children's books. Son Michael is the one investment banker at Goldman Sachs who prevents me from writing off the entire firm as a bunch of soulless moneylenders overdue to be driven from the temple. And in retirement, Mike and Susie re-entered the Peace Corps and are doing amazing work in El Salvador to this day. My family has measured out our own lives, too, as days have added up to make years and even decades. Through no fault of anyone, there hasn't been a time since my senior year of high school when anything resembling a holiday reunion of the two families has felt like an option. All of which gives these early Thanksgivings in Concord, New Hampshire, the additional advantage of unattainable distance, of hermetic purity, of deep nostalgia. They are still there in the rear view of the Pontiac as I hunker down for the nine-hour ride back to Pennsylvania, holding on to the residual glow of the visit as long as I can. And I have by no means relinquished these indelible impressions. All these years later, I still make cranberry tea in November, pull up my chamber music playlist, and try to convince my health-conscious family that muffins should be made. My mother and I spend a glorious Wednesday baking too many pies and cakes, which for me is as much a highlight of the Thanksgiving holiday as the actual meal. No matter how it plays out, at my parents' home, at Amanda's, at mine, it never quite measures up to my ideal, though. Not even close, to be honest. There is a certain alchemy in the particular combinations of people, places, and shared experiences that cannot be reproduced, even with the best of intentions and the warmest of hearts. This is the problem with nostalgia. No matter how deeply, how ardently we adore the past, it remains stubbornly behind us, and in the meantime the world has turned, the ground has shifted beneath our feet, and no matter how hard we try, whatever was cannot be recreated. There's no reason my family can't reconvene with the Jenkins. We're all still alive, though we live in 4 states now, not 2. And we number 15 these days, not 8. We do still see each other now and then, though rarely all of us at the same time. It's lovely, of course, but it's not the same. I'm not saying there wouldn't be a joy in watching another generation of children bump around the house and rekindling Scrabble rivalries, but it would be different. This is what I'm still struggling to learn. When we are fortunate enough to have lived through a moment that is special and meaningful enough to stand out from the rest of our memories, we are wise when we realize there is no point in trying to recreate it as much as we might want to. If anything, I should be grateful that this prized moment lasted 13 years. And we are wiser still when we look beyond the surface trappings of that moment and puzzle out the essential qualities that made that moment singular, and then seize the opportunities that come our way to experience those essential qualities of life in other ways. When I can see clearly past the New England house, the cranberry tea, the idyllic public radio station, and the wintry excursions, Jenkins' Thanksgivings are moments marked by mutual admiration, a joyful core with a great number of aesthetic pleasures in eccentric orbits around it, and an ethic of life as a rich labor with many splendid rewards. These, then, are the things I cherish, and these are the things I seek out in my life, not only on the fourth Thursday in November, but as frequently as possible in whatever manner they're available to me. We are the philosophers of our own lives, whether we realize it or not. We have the ability and the option to look around, seek meaning, and make conscientious choices based on what we find, what we know, and what we believe. My Thanksgivings at the Jenkins house are critical milestones in my life because they taught me the importance of social rituals in our lives, finding people to cherish, creating or perhaps discovering experiences with them that are deeply felt, and luxuriating in the rewards of those efforts. We are alive when we are connected to others, to the world, and to ourselves. And more often than not, those others, the world, and yes, we ourselves are better for it. My guess is that you know these things to be true, because you have experienced them in your own way with your own Jenkinses. Perhaps you are thinking of them now, savoring your own memories of people in your past and maybe your present, people who prove for you the goodness of friends and family, life and love. I honor yours as you have permitted me to honor mine. And my Thanksgiving wish to you every day of the year, my Jenkins Thanksgiving wish to you, is that you find yourself in the company of marvelous people, sharing simple but delightful experiences, and that you come away from them with a greater sense of beauty and goodness in the world. Happy holidays.